Got it. Thank you. I think, Sven, I've got a big sign in my office which says record, written in red letters, but I still sometimes forget. So welcome, everybody. I'm hosting in place of Adam, who's there. You might be able to see him. You might be able to see Adam, but he's not very well. He's got a bad throat. So he's trusting me. And Zoom is asking me if I have indeed changed language. Right, Zoom thinks I'm speaking Chinese. I'm sorry, that's not an option for me. So welcome everybody. And my colleagues are out there in their little Zoom boxes. Sven is on a train in Spain. Virashni is on a grade 8 camp on a farm. Adam should be in bed, getting better, but he's bravely here today, but his voice is not quite as it should be. Amanda is with us, I think from her school in London, and David from his Centre for Anthroposophy, I think in New York. So here we are again, and it's wonderful to see so many faces. And we're going to jump straight in to our presentations. Today, you're going to hear from David. You're going to hear from me. We're going to have a breakout room where you talk. We will ask you to talk a little bit about your training, what helped you become a teacher, and its relevance in the setting you find yourself, because so many of our upper school teachers have become teachers elsewhere in non-Steiner Waldorf settings. Then Virashni will be talking from the farm in South Africa, followed by Amanda down in London, and then a second breakout room. What do we take away and what do we expect from this course? Because there is then a little transition, because next week we will be getting more specialist and more focused on specialisms. Okay, so that's my introduction finished, exactly on time. David, over to you.
Good morning, everybody. It's morning here. I am in the gorgeous snow-covered White Mountains of New Hampshire. The Center for Anthroposophy, where I work, is in New Hampshire, and I am the director of the Waldorf High School Teacher Education Program here in New Hampshire. I got to speak to you all last week, and I have a few minutes to follow up and expand upon what I talked about last week. When I spoke with you last week, I spoke about a particular lecture that Steiner gave, a standalone lecture from June 21st, 1922, called Education for Adolescence, not to be confused with the book Education for Adolescence, which he gave is really as a follow-up course to the study of man, the first teacher's course, Pedagogical Anthropology. In that book, in that standalone lecture, Steiner talks about this idea that of all the important and vital tasks we have with adolescents, perhaps the most important is to help them discover meaning into their own lives. He says that between the ages of 14, 15, and 21, that it is so absolutely vital for these young people to find meaning. And he says that if they are unable to do so at that time, there are these two directions that many people mistakenly assume are the kind of nature, the trademark, the hallmark of adolescence itself, but are actually a problem if the riddles and mysteries of the human soul aren't engaged properly through meaning when these young people are in our care. The first, he says, is a delight in power. As opposed to the adolescent's natural feeling of this awakening self and their own abilities, there is this delight in power that can happen if meaning can't be found. And as opposed to the proper feeling of love for humanity, for friends, the general love of humanity and the specific love of individuals that naturally happens in adolescence, Steiner tells us that if the young person can't find meaning, then there's a transformation into this eroticism. So a delight in power and into eroticism, which are not the natural tendencies of adolescence. What I wanted to speak about today is the fact that this extraordinary human being, Viktor Frankl, who was a survivor of the Holocaust in 4 different concentration camps. As far as I know, Frankl and Steiner never met, and yet in his um, in his book, Man's Search for Meaning from 1946, Frankl comes to essentially the same conclusions as Steiner about this drive for meaning and what can happen if meaning is unavailable. Frankl had extraordinarily awful experiences of anti-Semitism, of persecution, of brutality, of physical abuse, of malnutrition, of emotional humiliation, loss of dignity, loss of loved ones. And he had this experience in the concentration camps that even though all of the victims in those camps were under the same terrible conditions, some were able to endure the hardship and the suffering, and some simply could not. And what Frankl discovers and shares with us is that it is the search for meaning, the finding of meaning individually. There is no collective meaning. This individual journey to meaning, if those who find it will thrive in life, even if they find meaning through suffering. But he tells us that if there is no ability to find meaning, then human beings, and particularly adolescents, end up in what he calls this existential vacuum. Frankl describes the predominant urge in the human soul as the will to meaning. And in the absence of that, in this existential vacuum, we can come to this state of boredom and distress. And if you think about how many of our adolescents are suffering from depression and anxiety, perhaps boredom. And Frankl tells us that in this existential vacuum, if the will to meaning cannot be realized and this young person finds themselves in this state of boredom and distress, there's 2 possible paths that can occur. The first, he calls the will to pleasure, which sounds to my ears an awful lot like Steiner's the young person delighting in eroticism. Frankl also talks about the will to power. So this depression and aggression and addiction, Frankl says, are natural in the face of this existential vacuum or lack of meaning. So if we want to help the young people in our care overcome depression, not fall prey to addiction, our greatest tool is helping them as individuals to find meaning. Frankl speaks about, in the presence of this inner emptiness, inner vacuum, lack of meaning, there's 2 things that can happen to people. He said, and he says this is especially true of adolescents. One, they either wish to do what other people do, rather than to try to become the individual that they were born to be and to unfold into their full individuality and humanity. They want to do, what other people do. Frankl calls this conformism, or, and maybe this is even worse, and as somebody who lives in the United States, certainly seeing this, to do what other people tell them to do. He talks about this tendency toward totalitarianism. So either to conform to what others do, forget about being an individual as a way to overcome the depression, the aggression, the addiction, the lack of meaning, the existential vacuum, or to do what other people tell them to do, to simply become the kind of person that would follow an authoritarian leader. A will to pleasure or a will to power, a wish to do what other people do, or a wish to do what other people tell them to do. These are the potential challenges for the adolescents in our care in the absence of meaning. So even though we may be a humanities teacher or a physics teacher or an art teacher or a world language teacher, our primary work, first and foremost, is in this realm of meaning. Our profession as Waldorf educators working with adolescents is to help these people to be guides on their own individual quest for meaning. This quest could come through deeds. It could come through finding beauty through art or finding love in a relationship. Frankl tells us it could even come through suffering. But what's most important is the finding of meaning. And that's essentially what I wanted to share with you all this morning. It's a little bit shorter than my time, but I just we wanted to put this up so high in the list of things to do. We're going to go through all these sessions and we're going to learn about the various disciplines and the way the Waldorf approach is unique. But amidst all that we do is, as specialists, this quest for meaning and helping the young people find that. Thank you so much. I'll turn it back to you, Alan. Alan, you are muted. Yeah.
I was indeed muted. By my timing, you had 2 minutes to spare. Thank you, David. So you can put those in the bank and use them another time. Thank you very much, David. I didn't know what David was going to say and how it would fit in with what I want to say, but I think it's okay. My focus is on a different word. My focus is on the word agency. Until about 10 years ago, the word agency didn't mean so much to me. I'd heard about the CIA, the Central Intelligence Agency. An agency was an organization. But psychologists and educationalists started to use the word agency in order to describe the ability of somebody to act and change things. I'll read the dictionary definition. Agency is a way of exerting power or producing effect. You can see how it follows on from what David was saying. Agency is to be able to set something in motion. Agency is the ability to influence an outcome. Everybody needs agency. We all need agency. As adults, we need it more than as children. I need agency over what I eat. It needs to be my choice. Over the clothes I wear, it needs to be my choice. I didn't always have that choice. I had to wear the clothes my mother made me wear. And when I became a teenager, I hated that. I wanted agency over what I wore. I didn't want to wear the things she gave me to wear. And maybe we've all experienced teenage children refusing to wear what they're told to wear. Maybe we know of children who go to school wearing one thing and secretly, quietly change into something else before they get to school. Good for them, I say. They're developing their power of agency. It's especially true, however, that teenagers need a sense of agency. Yes, question, is it agency you mean? Agency, agency. It's an unusual word. That's why I wanted to take time to explain it or describe it. Motivation, ambition, engagement, interest, aspiration, participation, they all need a sense of agency. The teenager needs to feel, one day, I will be able to change things. And I'm starting to change things now. I'm starting to push against what's coming towards me from others. And I'm sharing my screen with you, so hopefully you can see a little bit better. A little bit more focus. A way of exerting power to set something in motion, the ability to influence an outcome. It's a good thing. David mentioned power in the wrong way, not so good. But everybody needs a sense of agency, and teenagers especially. But not every teenager can be like this one. This is a teenager, Greta Thunberg in Sweden, who used her power of agency, her sense of agency, to make pretty dramatic changes. How can we as teachers of teenagers develop their power of agency? Well, I'm going to suggest a way that we can, and it might rather surprise you. It might be a surprising suggestion and a surprising focus, but here goes. I want you to imagine that you're an expert. Well, it's not easy, not difficult, because you are. You are all experts. Working in the high school, in the higher grades, you have an expertise. You have lots of knowledge. You have lots of passion for your subject. You're not short of books you've read. You've read lots of books and been to lots of lectures and conferences and workshops. And now you're allowed to bring your passion, your knowledge, and your information to teenagers. Not difficult to imagine. And now imagine that you do that and the teenagers switch off. They're bored. They're not interested. And I'm afraid for many of us, again, it's not difficult to imagine that. I think we've all had that situation where we are so eager to bring our passion and our interests and our knowledge that we bring too much. And there's so much that we want to cover and so many stories we want to tell and so many more examples, and we bring too much. And the children turn off and they lose any sense of engagement or enjoyment. And their sense of being able to influence anything is not helped by what we're doing. You might even ask yourself in those situations, what's wrong with these children? Why aren't they excited like I am? It's the wrong thing to ask. When I was their age, I wanted to change the world. Why don't they want to change the world? Again, wrong thing to ask. Another wrong thing to ask is, well, who was their class teacher in the lower grades? Because they didn't do a good job. Again, the wrong line of thinking. Altogether, the wrong line of thinking. What can you do as a teacher? So now I'm going to tell you a story. There you go. You can sit back and relax briefly. I'm going to tell you a story, and it's inspired by what Steiner said about preparing lessons and preparation. So some people will know that Steiner started teaching a young child with severe learning difficulties. He worked privately as a one-to-one tutor for a young child with terrible difficulties. And he describes the amount of time he spent preparing for those lessons with that one child. And it was an enormous amount of time for relatively short lessons. And he said that the teaching was very effective. And when I share this with teachers, they say, understandably, we can't give that time to preparing our lessons. No, have to be realistic. But Steiner said you need to teach out of abundance. And what you must never do is try and teach them everything you know, because you will put them to sleep. They need to know that you know it. They don't need to know it in the same way. Teach out of abundance. Let them sense that you have this knowledge and this expertise. Don't swamp them with it. Don't give them too much. That's not the story. This is the story, and it comes from ancient Rome. And like all the best stories, it may or may not be true. And like all the best stories, it doesn't really matter whether it's true or not. Once upon a time, the gods used to speak to human beings directly. We all have different stories in our different cultures of the gods or a god speaking to human beings. And we have different stories in our cultures of gods coming down to earth and actually getting involved in the nitty-gritty of human life. And slowly but surely, those stories change and the presence of the gods becomes a memory and is represented by a church or a king or an emperor. The Romans, they kind of borrowed their gods from the Greeks. The Romans were interested in other things, not what the gods had to say. The Romans, they were interested in practical things: central heating, roads, bridges, armies, strategy, law. Not so much what the gods had to say. But the Romans had a tradition that the gods apparently spoke through what they called an oracle. And the oracle was guarded by these wise women called the Sibyls. And for many children, certainly in the European storytelling tradition, they hear about the Sibyls and they probably picture them as a kind of witch. Well, the Sibyls were spoken to directly by God, at least that's what they claimed. But as Roman kings and later Roman emperors became less connected with the gods and more connected with the earth, they weren't interested in what the Sibyls had to say. Until finally, one of the Sibyls, realizing that the world had changed, came to see the Roman king. His name was Tarquin. And actually, the children loved the fact that he called himself Tarquin the Superb. Imagine being called David the Superb or Amanda the Superb. A wonderful name. Greta Thunberg the Superb. Tarquin the Superb. The Sibyl came to him and said, all the wisdom of the gods is contained in these 9 books. All the wisdom of the gods is contained in these 9 books. I will sell them to you for 100 gold pieces. Tarquin didn't take long to think about it. No, don't want them, he said. I'm not paying 100 gold pieces for those 9 books. The Sibyl was very put out. She threw one of the books in the fire, burnt to ashes. I'll sell you these 8 books, she said. What will the price be now? Tarquin asked. Still 100 gold pieces. Still 100 gold pieces. He didn't quite understand, and I won't keep this story too long. You can guess where it's going. She threw a second book on the fire, still 100 gold pieces, and a third book on the fire, still 100 gold pieces, until finally she burnt 6 of the books and only 3 remained. And by now, Tarquin the Superb, whose connection was not so much with the gods, really began to doubt. And he thought, what has she thrown on the fire? What has she burnt? Only 3 books are left. And he paid her. He paid her 100 gold pieces for the books that were left. Well, what has that story got to do with us as teachers of the upper grades? I would say this: for every book, every idea, every YouTube clip story, every bit of content or knowledge or experience that you bring, you have to hold back twice as much. Part of being a teacher in the higher grades is to hold back your wisdom and your knowledge, your opinions, and even sometimes your values. It's a real challenge for the high school teacher. I've got so much to show you and so much to share with you. But no, much of your task is to hold back in the way that, well, let's come back to Tarquin in a moment. Let me just share this finally with you so you can put this into the context of what Steiner said about things. We all need agency, and we need to develop the sense of agency in teenagers. Do I have the courage as a teacher, having heard this ridiculous story about the Roman Sibyl, to hold back my content, my opinions, my beliefs, my values? Do I need to look down into the school to see how the children have been educated in the grades? Now, be very careful and very tactful, because if children have been used to being educated like this, spoon-fed, fed too much, made too easy for them, they haven't been challenged to think. Thinking is important in grade school too, by the way. Then as teenagers, they might end up like this. And there's the exhausted teacher feeding this thing with his mouth wide open, but not really engaged. Not really engaged, or in real terms. There we are. Do these teenagers have a sense of agency? It might just be a bad day. They might have had a sleepover yesterday. But if somebody is trying to fill their head with content and ideas, all 9 books, not just the 3, then they will lose interest and they will lose their sense of agency, even as the teacher tries to encourage their sense of meaning that David referred to. And I'll finish off with what Steiner says on this subject. I'll let you read that for yourself. I love the last few words. All the possibilities of growth. We're not, as upper grade teachers, bringing the finished item. We're bringing all the possibilities of growth. And it's exploring into the possibilities of growth that stimulates the sense of agency. The teenager wants to find out the answers for themselves. And I will read these because I love these. Do not underestimate, my dear friends, this is Steiner, the value and usefulness in teaching of the unknown or half known. The child should live in expectation of what is yet unknown. So bear that in mind when there's so much that you want to share and you're under pressure to cover the curriculum and you feel you haven't done as much as the teacher last year did. Leave a space, leave a gap, teach out of abundance. Don't bring too much. Burn 6 books and teach from the 3. And you will have learnt your lesson in time to be an effective upper grades teacher. Okay, that's my presentation finished. Our plan now is to put you in breakout rooms and not to discuss what I brought or what David's brought, but of course, if these things come up, that's fine. Our suggestion is that you talk in the breakout rooms, and we know that from last week, people really enjoyed meeting people from different cultures and countries about your own entrance, really, your own pathway into teaching in a Steiner Waldorf upper grades high school setting. Because very few of us will have had formal training to be a high school teacher. What training did we have? What was the background that we bring to our teaching, and how relevant is it to being a Waldorf practitioner? Thank you. I'm hoping David has got, yeah, good.
Okay. I'm going to launch you into breakout groups. There should be 4 to 5 people in each group. Here we go.
Welcome back, everybody. I hope that worked for you. There was one group with 2 people, and I went to that group because I was very worried. And they were very polite. And the way they told me to go away, they were having a lovely chat. And I saw one group, I think the international mix was perfect. I think it was the United Kingdom and Vietnam and Indonesia and India and South Africa. Wonderful, wonderful. So I'm going to hand over now, speaking of South Africa, indeed to Varashni, who is taking time out from her grade 8 trip to the farm with her class. Varashni is hoping you're there somewhere. Well, I'll give her a couple of seconds. If not, Amanda, I'm going to ask you to step in. Would you be okay carrying on, Amanda? We'll wait for Virashni. She can follow you.
Yeah, that's fine.
Thanks, Amanda.
Okay. So I'm teaching in London in a high school that was founded, the high school was founded in 2012, and the school that I teach in is now 23 years old. And I'm actually one of the founder teachers of that school as well, still teaching there. I just wanted to talk about a phenomenon that I've seen developing really over the last 20 years or so, which is that students, more often than was previously the case, don't really listen unless they have a question themselves, unless they already have an interest in what's being said. That's either an interest in the sense of being curious and wanting to know about something, or in the sense of needing to know. So the way it manifests is in the classroom, especially with 15 and 16-year-olds, they tend to grow out of it. But with 15 and 16-year-olds, I have the experience that I tell the whole class what they need to do. And then over the course of the next few minutes, as they get their books out and their pens and their laptops and get to the point where they need to know what to do, they come to me one by one and ask me to tell them personally, one-to-one, what to do, usually with some vague awareness that I've already told them, but no, they're not apologetic about that. It's just normal. So they're in the habit of doing that. And then while they're working, different questions come up. And I found that, so they'll just call out a question, and then 2 or 3 minutes later, the same question will come from another student, and then again from another student. All the time I'm answering these questions loudly enough that everyone in the whole class can hear, but still they only actually hear when they get to the point where they need to know the answer themselves. And this happens even if they're all sitting quietly the whole time working. Of course, I have to deal with this in the moment, and I'll anticipate it now by writing instructions on the blackboard. And we need to have strategies like that to deal with those situations in the moment, so that they're not too many obstacles to the flow of the lesson. But at the same time, it's important to recognize the nature of the phenomenon, not just manage the symptoms, so that we can connect and understand the different ways in which it manifests in the students and the effect it has on the way they encounter and engage with the world. So this phenomenon may be the result of, or perhaps it's even one of the reasons why it exists, of the fact that if they want to watch a film or a TV program, they don't have to watch whatever happens to be scheduled by the TV stations at the time, as I did when I was growing up. They can curate, that's a word that you hear all the time now. They can curate their own personal program from the millions of options that are always available to them on the internet day and night. They can watch a whole season of a show in one go, whereas I used to have to wait a week for the next episode. They can find out about anything that piques their curiosity anytime they want to know. And this is not meant to be a criticism of this culture. It's our culture. We live in it as well. This is how it is. Our students don't know that anything else ever existed, really. They don't have an experience of any other kind of situation. So this is how it is, and this is what we have to work with. One of the results of this phenomenon can be that they don't learn how to really take an interest in things. If their attention is not immediately grabbed, they can move on to something else. That's what they're used to doing. So they begin to feel that everything has to be entertaining all the time. Otherwise, it's boring. They don't feel that they should stick with things. If there's a lull in the excitement, or if they have to make an effort, they can just move on. And that becomes the way they engage with the world. We can make them aware of how their attention is being drawn to certain things, and that they're not choosing as much as they think they are, that they're often being distracted so that people can sell them things. And that has to be an element in their education now. But we have to walk a line between making them conscious of what's going on through the media they use and making them cynical about other people, which we don't want to do. So there's quite a balance to be struck there. But the expectation that what they learn will depend on their personal choice has far-reaching implications. And it's a really new phenomenon. It could mean that whichever production company manages to grab their attention most powerfully will determine their future. The most popular university course in the UK at the moment is criminology, and that's almost entirely thanks to the Netflix true crime series that's so popular with our teenagers. Whatever the reasons are, and the growing experience of the individuality and humanity in general is certainly a factor in this. Our students are now used to the idea that they can choose what they pay attention to. The idea that they should sit still and listen attentively to everything their teachers say. I know that never happened really, but now it doesn't even occur to them. And if it does occur to them, it's an option. It's just one of the options. It's not something that you feel you have to do. Our response could be to let them choose what they learn. But of course, at 15 or 16, they don't have enough life experience to know what they might find interesting or what might be important for them to know or to be able to do. So the responsibility for providing a broad, rich curriculum is still ours. We could grab their attention with sensational experiences. You chemistry teachers out there, you could make things explode. That's always very popular. We could bring them highly controversial topics for discussion, like Andrew Tate. We can become magicians instead of teachers and turn our lessons into entertainment to try and compete with what they're looking at in their free time. But if we do this, our students become passive receivers, and they need to be active in their thinking. Douglas Goen talked about this in December, about how they need to be active thinkers, not just receivers of information. We can change our expectations of them. We have to do that, because they're not, the children we're working with, the students we're working with are different, and they're always going to be different, and they're going to change all the time, and we have to work with whatever is in front of us. In 2006, Ken Robinson gave a famous TED talk called Do Schools Kill Creativity? Waldorf teachers said, yeah, that's what we've been doing for hundreds of years, for 100 years. Why doesn't he mention us? I remember lots of people saying, why doesn't he mention us? Because what he's saying really rings bells with us. And he doesn't. But in part, he's describing what Waldorf education aims to do, or at least what it should aim to do. At the heart of his thesis is the conviction that everybody has something about which they're passionate, and that for most people, existing education systems kill those passions. And I think sometimes we're guilty of doing that in Waldorf schools as well. It happens because there's a fixed, I'm talking about the UK now, I don't know how much this will resonate with people in other countries, I hope to some extent. There's a fixed and narrow range of knowledge and skills that's been designated as important and valuable, and other things that are soft or useless. So STEM subjects, science, engineering, technology, mathematics, are considered the most useful now, and they're given more time and more resources. I'm talking about mainstream education mainly, but not only, at the expense of the arts and humanities, which are considered to be less important for human beings. I don't want to go into how short-sighted that is, even from an economic point of view, but in this way, a hierarchy of school subjects has become established in our culture, and people who are good at maths and science are perceived as cleverer than people who are good at art or creative writing or eurythmy. We know it's not true, but most people believe it, even if they believe it subconsciously, and the students carry that perception with them. These STEM subjects are promoted because they're useful in jobs that support the economy of our country. And there's nothing wrong with that to some extent. But they're also being promoted because there aren't enough people studying them at higher level at the moment for the economy. And the question is, why are people not choosing to study these things? Could it be because they're interested in other things, that their interests lie elsewhere? In our school, we've noticed that the students who thrive, the ones who engage enthusiastically with learning generally and who enjoy school, are the ones who have a passion. And it doesn't seem to matter what the passion is. It can be football, tennis, music, acting, writing, photography, fashion, art, mechanics. What matters is that it's something they do, and something they do just because they want to do it. Something for which they're willing to push themselves, to go out of their way for, that makes them feel accomplished. By engaging in this passion, they're practicing, taking an interest, pushing past the hard bits, going beyond what's comfortable, learning through experience that if they persevere, they'll get better at it, that everything is sometimes boring or difficult, but that enduring those parts will give them a greater feeling of achievement in the end. These are invaluable experiences that develop in these people capacities that gradually become part of who they are and which permeate everything they do. They become a habitual way of engaging with the world. These people learn that everything and everyone is interesting if you take an interest, if you take an interest, and are prepared to work at it, including relationships. They then approach all of their learning and all of their relationships and the world in general with the expectation that this, whatever it is potentially something interesting. And that's a totally different way of approaching the world from expecting things to be given to you as entertainment. Of course, we have to develop in ourselves the habit of approaching everything and everyone with interest, and this includes our students. We are also living in this world. We're also subject to these same problems. In our high school meetings recently, we've been studying Peter Selg's book, A Grand Metamorphosis. And in that book, he highlights the importance of the relationship of mutual interest that can and should develop between teachers and teenagers. He says, in almost all difficult cases discussed in the faculty meetings, Rudolf Steiner saw that what was missed was the individualizing aspect of the education, the alertness and openness for the future in the attitude of the teachers toward the emerging individuality of the young person, and at the same time, their personal interest in him or her. The young people were, in Steiner's view, looking for a genuine relationship with their teachers. He then goes on and quotes Steiner. The teachers have not developed a sufficiently deep insight into the psychology of the individual students. That is not a matter of investing a lot of time, but that one develops a fine feeling for this contact so that the students understand rightly what the teacher strives to achieve. This is an ability that one can acquire. What there is now is a certain distance. In the current climate, at least in the UK, this probably makes some people feel uncomfortable. We have to be aware that when we speak of relationships between teachers and students, when we speak about loving our students, as some of us do, this can be misinterpreted and regarded with suspicion. So we have to be careful now how and where these things are expressed. Nevertheless, this should not stop us from recognizing that a close relationship of genuine interest, mutual respect, and affection with our students is what we're striving for. And the line will be drawn in different places for different students. And we have to find the right balance in those relationships ourselves. Steiner warns, on the other hand, in the same extract that Peter Selg quotes, against meeting the students on their own level, blurring the line that must be there between the teacher and student. He says if we do that, it will put you at their mercy. Put you at the mercy of your students and turn them into brats, he says. So we have to also walk a line there between those two things. But if we can recognize what lives as a passion in each of our students and acknowledge that it's part of who they are and encourage it, our students will feel seen. They are seen by us and are reassured both that what they care about matters and that we understand and care about them. By cultivating an interest in what interests them, we also become more interested in them as people and to care about and love them. The relationships we develop with our students engender in them a wish to engage with us and what we are teaching, as well as our wish to engage with them and to find what inspires them. If we then connect our teaching with their passions, we connect with that state of being already interested that will secure their attention. And then we can lead them through their own enthusiasm to aspects of life and the world that they didn't know existed. So in my sessions on history later in the term, I will give some examples about how you can do that. Thank you. Handing back to you now, Alan.
Thank you, Amanda. Oh, criminology. I didn't know that was the most popular choice. I also read an article which said that most popular TV programs in this country, the detective is a woman. It's female detectives. I feel there's a balance that's being addressed there as well.
It's the girls that want to study criminology in our school.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Virashni lost connection, but I'm hoping she's back and she's going to make herself known and I can spotlight her and she can carry on.
Hello, I am here. Thank you.
Hi, Virashni.
Shall I go?
You get started and I'll put the spotlight on you.
Yes. Well, interestingly enough, I did study criminology at school, at university, so that's a good place to start. But I thank you everyone for this opportunity to speak here on Waldorf 360. I had been tasked with a topic related to art, so I'm going to start a screen share. So let's go. And I'm just going to there. Do we have it?
Yep.
Hello?
Yes, yes, we have.
Okay. Sorry. Thank you. So the topic I was given is really artistic activity as a tool in phases of crisis. And what we've been hearing for the last 2 weeks is really, and as we recognize that adolescence is really this phase to 18, but within each year, it has its greater crisis moments. And within each experience of a main lesson, within each term of the year, within each social dynamic activity, there's always moments of crisis. And I too enjoy already look at words because I'm an English teacher as well, but I really wanted to look at this word crisis. Because what I heard from our 3 other speakers today is really what are we guiding ourselves through? And also this taking in and really looking at the young people we are meeting today. And often what I've experienced personally as a Waldorf teacher and in becoming and meeting new children, developing myself and pioneering different things and experiences, there's always a kind of inner crisis of the teacher as well. But what actually does that mean? And how are we supposed to guide these young people who are in the crisis of their development if we too are in a kind of fearful state of, am I really prepared? So I looked at the word crisis, and there's 2 very, very similar meanings that come up when you Google the word. And I found it quite extraordinary, and it relates to what we're doing. So essentially, a time of intense difficulty or danger. And we know that is really essentially life, and more so for the adolescent. And some of the words or the synonyms related to crisis are the following: catastrophe, calamity, emergency, disaster, mess. Aren't our teenagers always quite a mess? And the teacher themselves, especially the guardians or the mentors, are struggling with the dilemma of their messes. Quandary, setback, reversal, and reverse. Actually, quite negative words. But then I looked at another meaning, trouble, drama, of course, the drama of life, hardship and adversity. And while these words are all quite true, there's a flip side to it, another meaning, a time when a difficult or important decision must be made. And in a way, that is what we are guiding our young people towards, to be able to have the agency to find the quest for meaning through purposeful activity. And that's what we find through art, and not just art as a specialized subject. But I'm interestingly enough, before I go on with that, I want to look at what other words for crisis came up. Critical point, a turning point, a crossroads, critical period, of course, crux, the essence of something, a climax, a culmination, height, moment of truth, 0 point, and of course the Rubicon that Sven mentioned last week when he looked at the primary school. These are these moments that happen throughout the day, the life, and the year of our teenagers in our care. So very interestingly enough, I feel that sometimes we kind of go very much into the left column of things when we look at teenagers. And we've been reminded here of what our work has to be. And therefore, these wonderful positive words, it's positive, but a reminder that these are just moments of development that we have to guide through. So I just want to move on. So crisis, interestingly, is just this period. Another word that we often hear in Waldorf schools is a threshold moment. A threshold, a doorway into something else. And we need to really start looking at what that holds for us as we guide our young people through those thresholds and not just get sunk into the crisis moments. So what I'm sharing here now is a transcript of a presentation by 2 young girls shared by Sven. These were 2 young girls in India, I believe, during COVID, when there was some online teaching, and they wanted to express during that very, very difficult and challenging global period that these young people were trying to find their voice through an artistic expression. So I'm just going to stop this for now and share that video with you.
You lay in the bed, pretending that your distorted mind is resting. Maybe in your wildest dreams it does. But what no one knows is that there is no rest. Even though all you wish for is 1 second to take a breath. This is the war, the reality. It never ends.
You wake up, look in the mirror, dragging yourself, push, fight harder. And all that you see in the all-powerful black is a girl distorted, chained, changed, beaten down by her own pack. And when the desire to be original rises, you push it down, lock it like your darkest secret. No one inquires, every man for himself. This is the war. It never ends.
You walk as elegantly as your burning brain lets you down the coveted hall, and your family and friends sit there so tall. You have to be perfect like them. And when they ask you why your grades are in 10 out of 10, a small piece of your soul drifts. God knows, even if a part of it is left. But your well-being is not a priority. You must fight to keep them happy, because this is the war. It never ends.
Staying on the height of their expectations, it chokes you. The very start of this battle broke you. And you can wail, you can cry as the bar of standard pounds you, but even the tears won't dry. Your body's a cold bruise. And every hateful, heavy breath that you take is so that someone who doesn't give a damn about you thinks you're at least okay. And work until your wretched life ends. Your life is controlled by another to make sure they're content. This is the war. It never ends.
But this rage inside rose and provokes me. I'm glad that they're happy, but what about my glee? And as the chained up angels on my shoulders die, the demons that they will learn to fear are born to rise. And as for the strings that I gave them to push me around, I will cut into smithereens like a hungry bloodhound.
This is my life now.
And it's time I took charge,
Your hatred and opinions are not a part,
because I'm the captain of my fate.
and the master of my soul.
Okay, thank you. So that really is an expression of a process where children can now, in times of crisis, use art to really find an expression of what that needs to be. All of their things that they need to experience in themselves, they're still trying to find their identity. How does that work? We are then, the art is that tool that can allow the children in our high schools to then be able to process what they have feeling in their feeling life. Sometimes it's manifest in feelings of implosion, or that will to power in aggression and vandalism and a kind of inner struggle. It is a war that they are facing, and art in various expressions, whether you're a language teacher, the handwork teacher, the craft teacher, the art teacher, the music teacher, we have all these specialists, but we need to start as specialists to integrate our subjects. Where is the breathing spaces for our children to really express that inner questions that they have? We have to start to birth the questions. Identity is negotiated, and that's what they're starting to do, to negotiate their identity with their feeling life, their thinking life, and now what do I have to bring into the world? What is being asked of me? Art, any expression of art, especially with speech, is I speak my meaning into the world. But we have to help to birth those questions. Art is very therapeutic. Instead of just bringing these boring kind of conceptual ideas that they could very easily Google these days. And we're trying to impose, as Amanda was saying, impose these ideas, our great knowledge onto the students. They are going to be bored. We need to help them find their own thoughts about new things and find creative ways to express their thoughts and their judgments, especially around social justice. Who am I becoming? Things about compassion. How do I work and feel with the other and create those moments? And because I've been an English drama teacher as well, I moonlighted as a drama teacher, I am going to then talk about some of my experiences of doing that. So here I have a few pictures of a Greek tragedy. It looks very, very Eurocentric, of course, and very classic. But here you will see that we have integrated eurythmy into a Greek production. It worked well with the class because they had a great passion for eurythmy. And they had a great passion for really individualizing the masks. They didn't want to all look uniform. Maybe the major characters would have done that, but they took on the production, says, yes, we want to do eurythmy and we want to do it traditionally. And they helped each other create those masks. And in other productions, in other years, we had more modern versions of it because that was the nature and the passion of the class. And of course, children, of course, with the teacher, help to find out what that kind of end process would be. So we have to be aware of, even with any artistic expressions, what is the intention? What is the passion of our young people? What are we trying to birth within them? And give them meaningful and purposeful engagement within what they need to produce at the end of it, or not really produce. I know people find that word very distasteful, but what is the end of a process to say, here I stand and this is who I am? Because we must expose our children voluntarily and with great support through very, very challenging processes. And that is the real and hardest task of really bringing everything into their will. A child can be very passionate, but how do we convert that passion into a reality that serves not only themselves and their class community, but also when they leave us, have a great feeling of responsibility for the world through their actions. And art can do that, because then it exposes them also that we have to work together. These are my strengths. How do I recognize myself within my community? And they volunteered to do particular tasks. This was another class 12 play. And we find here that many of the young men are doing the hard labor in a way. It was mostly because they didn't want to learn their lines, but the teacher knows. So you give them what they want to get involved in, and you let them breathe, and then they go back to what they have to do. And it's similar to being saying, okay, a child who's very academic, let's have some breathing space. How do I find the connections within the various subjects to bring something new? And as a philosophy teacher as well, it's the children are very sometimes upset, especially the science and math students, when I bring a mathematical concept to illustrate something philosophically in the humanities, and they can see something with a new light. So yes, we are specialists, but it is time now that we have to integrate our subjects, and we have to work together to share. We have to take the time out to do the art. Then we can work on birthing the thinking so that there are new ideas and new ways of seeing the world, and not stale ideas that come through us for their new paths for the future. Alan, I'm not sure how much time I have left.
You don't, Varashini. That's it.
Okay, so I'm just going to end here.
Yep.
It's something quite universal right now, and I'll leave this quote with you. We make art to connect, not to stroke our egos, not to win awards, not as bragging rights or achievement, not to compete, compare, or replicate, not to pretend. We make art to connect to others, to memory, to ceremony, to the earth, to water, to the deep fire within, to our own energy in the wings waiting. We make art to connect to life. And that's Victoria Erickson. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Varashini. It's wonderful to hear a criminologist who's found her passion. If I can call it that. That was wonderful. And what a lovely link between Amanda and yourself there. There's so much. So we haven't got much time left. We're going to have one more breakout room, and it's going to be shorter than the last. It won't take so long. And in the breakout room, we would just like you to share briefly, what are you taking away from today's session? Oh my word, there's a lot, but what are you taking away? And also, what are you hoping to get out of this course moving forwards? Are you a specialist focusing on one thing? Are you a generalist studying child development generally of teenagers? Are you a parent following your child's path through high school? So I think David's ready with breakout rooms, and there might be some slight changes from last time to make them all a reasonable size. And I will call you back in good time for the close, when we shall also hear about what's happening next week. So,
All right, here we go.
Go.
Sound good?
yeah. Welcome back, everybody. Nearly everybody. I just met 13-year-old Anushka, who's been trying to follow the course, and she went to one of the breakout rooms, and I think people used their discretion correctly and sent her back. That is wonderful that a student of 13 is trying to learn and improve. She said it was better than watching television anyway. That's very good. Now, hope was, as we close the meeting, that we can just put the focus a little bit on next week, and indeed the next phase of the course. So I hope you understand that we've had 2 sessions now, which were a broad overview of adolescent development, with lots of loose threads and lots of interesting ideas, hopefully many, if not all of which will return in time. But from this point on, because high schools are places of specialism and specialists, the focus will change from month to month. Having said that, to listen, for example, in the coming weeks to specialists in handwork and handcraft and working with the outdoors, I would say these things are relevant to all of us, everybody, and not just specialists in those areas. So I'm just putting a shout out to see if Simon is there or if Kemal is there. And maybe they're not. That's okay. But in their absence, we can tell you that they are experts in their field. In their field, literally, in the case of Simon, who now lives in the north of France, and he was the gardening and outdoor teacher at Michael Hall School in the United Kingdom for many years, and he contributes to a number of training courses. If I say he has soil under his fingernails, that's a compliment because he's so connected with the earth. Kemal, David, do you know him?
Yes, so Kemal Lowenthal was a student, I think a lifetime Waldorf student at the Green Meadow Waldorf School in New York. He taught at the Maine Coast Waldorf School in Maine and is currently back now as a teacher at Green Meadow School, where he teaches all sorts of handcrafts, and probably other than soil under his fingers, he probably has wood chips and clay under his fingernails.
Thank you. That's exactly what I wanted. And I hear more and more stories of people of a certain generation who leave teaching and go and do teacher education and teacher training. And then they miss it. They miss the classroom and they go back. So be careful, David. You've been warned. They go back into the classroom. I would like to say a big thank you to all of you. I've run breakout rooms for 3 or 4 years. I've never seen so many people go to their breakout rooms and stay in their breakout rooms and not disappear to the toilet or the cafe, and to stay on task. And it was wonderful. Again, apologies, anybody who's worried about paying for the course. We're finding from some countries it's difficult. From India, it's slow. From other countries, it seems to be dead easy. Don't worry, we trust each other. The invoice will come and we know that payment will come to pay our excellent contributors in the months ahead. We look forward to seeing you next week. Soil under the fingers, wood chips under the fingers. There's an image for you to take away. Do with it what you will. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank
Good
you.
night.
Salamat.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Bye.
Have a good day.
Salamat.
Thank you.
Thank
Thanks a lot.
See you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye.
Bye. See you next week.